Hi, this is Bob. Welcome back to our channel for Michigan Laser Restorations. Today we are working on a 16-foot double-wide mahogany entryway. This was a really interesting project because it was a solid stain that had applied over a thick urethane covering, which also had an original stain underneath that. Unfortunately, what that meant is you had to go with two different passes on this door frame. The first pass required settings to remove that brown stain as you see it there, and that was actually pretty easy to get off. The second pass required modulating settings for scan spacing and pulse width to allow the urethane coating to be disintegrated to the point that it could be then easily removed with hand sanding. This is one of those things that just happens on projects, and I wanted to make sure I showed what can happen. You get out there to a project site, you think you have everything planned, and then you have to adapt at the last minute. I also wanted to point out that at the end of the video, I did make sure to include the settings that I used to remove the urethane from this door frame. It took some trial and error to get it figured out, but it was successful in the end. The settings actually worked to remove the dark brown coating as well as to essentially weaken that urethane down through an embrittlement process to make it so we could get it off. But those settings are at the end. So I'm going to let the video play for a little bit. We'll try putting some music to it, a little different process today, and see what y'all think. I wanted to point out this part because I thought it's pretty interesting. Sometimes you end up having to go upside down in order to clean the underside of wood. This is a case where this was required. One thing I want to point out is when you do this, you need to make sure you have enough airflow coming through the nozzle of your cleaning head to ensure you're not getting any debris that's falling on the lens. If you do get debris falling on the lens, it will burn onto that lens, and you'll have to remove the sacrificial lens, which is about a $20 cost if you do it over and over again. Each lens is kind of expensive, so you want to try to avoid it. But it's just one of the things you want to look at, especially if you do have to do some kind of weird orientation or you have a lot of dust going. Just keep checking your lens every so often to make sure it's clean and you don't have any debris starting to form on that lens. Again, once it's on there, it's burned on and it's pretty much impossible to get off. we had to do is go back over the entire system one more time using these settings to get what we needed to get that final urethane off of the material. So I wanted to make sure I provided these to you. I'm working right now to buy an f420 lens. I think I can change a lot of these settings and get a lot better performance. But this is where we're at today. Thanks.